Hey everybody, and welcome back. Today we were diving into pleasurable relationships by talking about how to actually talk about sex. We know that the most successful and happy couples, they are having conversations regularly about their intimacy and their pleasure. But that can be easier said than done, especially if you grew up in purity culture or you just never had the experience of talking about intimacy open with a partner and being supported and safe and actually having it go the way that you want. So what are you supposed to do then? Well, if you can relate, then you're in the right place today. We'll be covering the number one roadblock I see couples run into that holds them back from having powerful conversations that improve their intimacy over time, and the 3 practices that successful couples use to have these conversations. We'll be answering when you should be talking about sex, how you can actually go about these conversations, and what to do when things aren't going the way that you want them to, so y'all can get back on track and in alignment towards a more deeply pleasurable relationship. If that sounds good to you, then keep on watching and don't forget to press like and subscribe below so you never miss out on a future episode. My name is Craig Cassie, and this is Coaching Naked. Hey everybody, and welcome back. Craig Cassie here, the executive pleasure coach for entrepreneurs, couples, and singles looking to live more deliciously and lead more audaciously, whether in your business, your relationships, or in your life at large. And today we're doing that by talking about how can you talk about sex with your partners, especially if it's not currently in your comfort zone, which if that's you, don't worry, it's kind of par for the course. For most of us, we didn't grow up in spaces or families or a culture where talking about sex was normalized, right? Having open conversations, requesting what we wanted or not from our partners, and therefore can feel scary, can be triggering or uncomfortable when we're in a really good relationship and we realize there are some places where we're dropping the balls, metaphorically speaking, when it comes to how we actually create pleasure and fulfillment for each other, right? We don't want to upset the other person, but we still want to get our needs met. And how can we have that conversation? So if that's you, don't worry. Just know that there's a learning curve to this that you never had the chance to get around before. And today we're going to do it together. Before we go on though, I'd love to know in the comment section below, 0 to 10, how would you rate yourself and your comfort level when it comes to talking about sex and pleasure with your partners? 0 being, it's very difficult, very uncomfortable, you'd rather not do it. 10 being more something like the words flow from your lips, right? No matter what the number you put below, we're going to try to raise it today. So what is the major roadblock I see people run into time and time again, holding them back from actually having these conversations? Well, it's really 2 parts. And the first is a lot of us, we never learn how to have this conversation. What are the words to use? How can we create a shared language? How can I speak in a way that my partner will understand, and vice versa? And that's essential. We'll be covering that all throughout today's video. You'll hear a lot of examples of that. But the second one is, for many of us, having these conversations are outside of our comfort zone. And I hear clients share their fear. I'm afraid my partner will feel judged, or I'll make them feel bad, or I'll be judged or rejected. And we don't want that. But all that self-talk, they're examples of triggers we have physically in our body when we're trying to do things out of our comfort zone. And typically when we're being triggered, we're either going to pull back and shut down, or we might try to get in our head and think 1,000 miles a minute to try to control the outcome for a conversation. And while that might be good for self-defense, control is not made for relationships. We want a partnership, not control and manipulate how conversations go. So if that's you, we really need to, A, learn how to create spaces where you will not be triggered as much, knowing that these conversations will still be triggering a bit, and also increasing your capacity to have your conversations while you're in that space. So what do? We might take a page from the book of successful couples out there, and all we mean by successful couples is that they self-report as being happy, healthy, and fulfilled in their sex life and in general, right? There are many ways to be a successful couple. We're not going to give you the only strategy to get there today, but we're going to take some advice from their experiences that we can apply to improve yours too. And the first piece of advice is to have conversations casually about pleasure, period. You might have heard me say pleasure and not sex. Why is that? Because if you're lacking in the intimacy department, whether it's sex or elsewhere, you're probably lacking in your general experience of creating pleasure together. You're probably not talking about it. You're probably not being open about what kind of pleasure you want, even just experientially in your life. So we might begin to expand your comfort zone of talking about pleasure and intimacy and sex by starting with topics that feel more comfortable. For example, we might begin to give positive feedback and mention where we are experiencing pleasure with our partners already. Begin to fill up their cup so they can fill up ours. And say things like, hey, last night when we went for a walk, I really enjoyed getting to hold your hand. I felt loved, it felt tender, I'd love to do more of that. Can we? Or we might begin to lead with curiosity when our partner might be open to receiving more pleasure. Like, hey, I notice you're having a stressful week. Is there anything I can do that would help you feel better and that would be pleasurable? We're going to begin to have these conversations of saying, hey, here's what I like, here's what I'm enjoying that we're doing, right? Give our partner some positive affirmation and keeping it lighthearted. So we're learning to trust ourselves and having these conversations and priming our partner to receive conversations about pleasure more easily so they're not defensive or they're not going to be triggered themselves, right? Creating a culture around pleasure as a couple that says we commit to pleasure, we are building pleasure, we clearly are taking steps often for pleasure, and we do it casually because when we haven't had these conversations in a while, sometimes we want to have a big 90-minute chat and it feels very high stakes, right? Or we get into our head, this feels very make or break it, and we don't want that. We want to begin by easing into the topic so we can prime our nervous system and our partner to feel more comfortable talking about pleasure. And let's be honest, whether it's holding hands or massages or cuddling or creating date nights with your partners or nice dinners, if you begin to get curious about where you can create pleasure more generally speaking in your relationship, that actually fills up your cup and leads to more of a nourished capacity to experience eroticism too. So tip number 1 is have casual conversations about pleasure. Make pleasure a regular and normal part of your everyday life. Tip number 2 is to answer the question, when to have these conversations. And, from what we know of our successful couples, they're having conversations around pleasure, intimacy, and sex regularly. And I do not just mean right before, during, or right after. There's no need for a game time review after every single time you play. Please give yourselves a space to enjoy and just luxuriate in the pleasure. But they're having regular conversations over breakfast, while they're walking the dog, while they're watching Netflix, because they're not treating intimacy or sex or pleasure as a conversation that is only allowed in certain times during the day. Right? Some problems we run into when we hold on to conversations around pleasure and wait until the right time is sometimes we share with our partner that we want to play at the end of a day, after work, after dinner, after the kids are in bed. And one partner is too tired and they don't want to play, understandably. But maybe if they had known earlier, they would have been open. They would have rested a bit more, taken an afternoon nap, maybe had espresso. Who knows? But we want to begin to create really a clear channel to have conversation regularly about pleasure. So what can this look like? In the morning, we might begin by just complimenting our partner for the things that went really well last night. When we affirm how things go well, it can even be a fun form of foreplay. Imagine how it would feel for you if your partner woke you up by telling you how good last night was and what they loved and how they want more of that today or later this week. It can certainly get some wheels moving. Second, we can also begin to pepper more casually our interests throughout the day. Texting or in regular conversation. Hey, we saw some Netflix. I'd be open to that. That seems a bit wild, but we could try. Asking questions like, hey, what are you in the mood for these days? What are some things we haven't done recently that you really used to enjoy, that you want to bring back into our sex life? Right? These are typically not 90-minute conversations, right? These couples are not sitting down on the daily every breakfast hashing out for 90 minutes what they want to do. They are simple one-offs. They are light, they are casual, they are speaking to interest and desire, and they're also very open-ended. One roadblock I hear couples get into when it comes to sex is that they will have a desire for the day and attach it to a demand. Well, I want it today. I need it today. And for some partners, especially those who have avoidant tendencies, that can really shut down their erotic systems. So an alternative is to actually share what it is you want, and then to say, I would love to do this in the next week. Is that something you'd be open to? Yeah, great. How can we make that happen? In case we need to schedule a play date, in case there are other things to take care of in advance, right? When we make it open-ended, we create a lot more possibility to actually have that kind of play that we want without attaching it to an expectation, a demand, or an outcome that we're requiring, right? It creates a lot more freedom in the expression of play. So tip number 2 is simple. Have more conversations regularly, right? Allow them to be soft, light, one-offs. Share what you like. ask what they like. Share what you don't like. Ask what they don't like. And let it be this much more consistent part of your everyday life. The more we do this, right, the more access you have to understanding what it is your partner wants, and you actually get to train them in what you want. Because even if you've been with them for a while, they might not know all the things that turn you on or that get you off. And I think sometimes we forget that. We've got to teach them and train them. And it doesn't need to be a 2-hour mastermind. It can be training done with little pieces of feedback across weeks at a time. That brings us to tip number 3. What do you do when things aren't pleasurable or when there is pain involved? How do you talk about that? And to answer that question better, we're going to go in 2 different directions. First off, if there's pain in the act, and pain is not your pleasure, pain is not your kink, you want to stop, this is a time to speak up and use your words. Our partners don't always know from our body language or our face, even if we hope that they would, that we are in pain and we need something different. So that's the time when you say, hey, my body's not feeling this, or even, ouch, that hurts. Can we stop? Can we pause? Now, in that moment, a few things might be happening. If you're feeling pain, sometimes our body wants to shut down and actually takes us out of being open to pleasure in the moment, right? If that's you, then we might follow up that feedback of saying, my body's not feeling this, or ouch, that hurts, with, hey, that hurts, and I think I need something else to get my body going again. Are you open to slowing down and going back to kissing or massaging, right? Or doing something that actually feels good for your body and helps you open up and get back to that place. You might also just not be in the place to have sex, and that's totally okay, right? Our bodies are not always where we want them to be. And if there's pain, maybe what we say is, hey, right now is not the time. I'm realizing my body is not ready or is not in the mood. Can we try again at a later date, later tonight, later this week, and go do something else? Grab a coffee, make a snack, right? If your partner is telling you that, this is a moment to lean in with curiosity and compassion and say, hey, I hear you. What would you like to do? Do you want to go back to kissing, some massaging? Is there something I could do, a different position maybe? That might feel better, more lube. Or hey, if you don't want to, that's totally understandable. We might feel sad in that moment because we'd like to keep going, but we're here to meet our partners where they're at so we can actually build collaboratively, right? A partnership is collaborative. Pleasure feels best when it is collaborative. And so that's kind of the back and forth we are open to in that moment, to be responsive, supportive, compassionate, and to check in on what would actually feel best, no matter if it means continuing or not. Now, on the flip side, if we're talking more generally about what to do when things are not going well, you're not having the frequency you want, or the play you want, or what used to feel good now feels stale, I recommend having a chat with your partner using a positive feedback sandwich. It looks like this. Hey, I really love when we do XYZ. It feels so good to my body, and I'd love to talk more about our pleasure with you. Are you open to some feedback about some things that could help us have more fun and help me enjoy our play together even more, right? We give affirmation, we get their buy-in, and then we give them feedback. Just 1 or 2 pieces. We're not gonna slide in a 10-point plan of improvement here. We want this to be digestible, but we'll say, hey, I notice my body isn't really enjoying these things, or I realize I don't like these things as much as I thought I did. Can we try something else? We give feedback and a suggestion so that we actually train our partner with how they might support us more. Sometimes when we just give feedback of what we don't want and nothing else, our partner feels a bit lost at sea, right? We want to give some support, some boundaries, some instruction to help them love us better. Then after that, we actually just wrap up with some more affirmation and we should be good to go. We acknowledge and affirm first because it helps us relax and our partner actually be open to receiving feedback, and also it fills up their cup. We want our cup filled up, we want to fill up theirs too. And then we give a few pieces of advice or feedback to help things get going in the direction we desire. Now, if you're always the one leading the conversation, you notice your partner is actually not giving you too much feedback themselves, you might actually ask them the same questions. Hey, what am I doing well? That feels really good. What could I be doing differently? Or what is not going so well that you want me to change, stop, or pivot? Right? Our partners might not always be the forthcoming ones, but we still want to know what feels good for them. So there you have it. You heard 2 of the main roadblocks getting in the way when it comes to having conversations about sex and intimacy, and 3 different practices you can use to really help overcome it. Now, at the top of today's video, I asked you to drop a comment below around how do you actually feel regarding your comfort level and having these conversations. I'd like to ask you again, reconsider. How do you feel now? If you can imagine yourself applying these tools, does it make it easier? Does it make it harder? Let me know. And best of luck in your pleasure journey. It's my pleasure serving you, and I can't wait to see y'all next week.